Hi everyone, my name is Matthew Griffin. I'm the CEO and founder of the 311 Institute, the World Futures Forum and Exponential University. So as a futurist, I typically look up to 50 years out, but I kind of look at two kinds of futures. I look at the next 20 years, which I regard as the future, and then I look at the next 50 years, which I regard as the deep future. So the vast majority of multinational clients spend their time in the next 20 years, and governments often spend their time trying to figure out the next 50 years. So that's why the split there. Now, in this particular presentation, we're going to be going through a lot. And the reason for that is because a lot of things are changing. Okay, so with no further ado, basically this is the agenda that I've actually laid out for you. Now, it looks quite small, it looks quite simple, but we are going to be getting into details and we're going to be exploring the future of different topics and themes that you might not have actually spotted, seen, or actually even considered or thought about. So we're going to be talking about leadership in an exponential age. We're going to be talking about upticking universal trends. So this is where we actually go through many of the trends and many of the technologies that are affecting many different lines of business. So this is quite a large section in itself. And then we're going to be talking about the end of status quo. Now that's where I'm going to be talking you through the disruptions that we are already seeing happening to individual sectors that you all care about. So when we have a look at basically just the present day, we often describe the present day as permacrisis. Now this signifies basically that we're in a time of change, war, high inflation, supply chain snarl-ups, let alone basically pandemics and everything else that we've actually seen. So from a leadership perspective and from a client perspective, this is really sort of what organizations are most worried about. How do they actually see what's coming? How do they understand what it actually looks like, what it means for them and their organizations, and then how do they adapt and respond depending on whatever it is that they're actually up to and the sectors they're involved in. Now, when we have a look at the future of anything, there are hundreds of different trends that are affecting you and your clients, whether that's directly or indirectly. And there are hundreds of emerging technologies where AI, for example, or metaverse, or Web3, or blockchain, or VR, AR, MR, 3D printing, and so on and so forth, are just 10 technologies out of hundreds of exponential technologies. Now, to try to put this into some form of context, I write books. So you can think of these books as being my memory backup. Now, if you scan the QR code, you can download these codexes for free. They're about an inch thick. And to try to show you just how many trends your clients are trying to get their heads around, the only way that I can really get this across in any way that makes sense and in anything that is shorter than a day is to put them into a quick 2-minute video. So I'm going to press play and just think of this. Every trend is up there for about 1/4 of a second, and these are the trends that your customers are thinking about, and so on and so forth. So hundreds of trends in 2 minutes. Now, when we actually have a look at, for example, the impact that emerging technologies are having on global industry and society, it's estimated by companies like ARK Investment that these technologies are already destroying up to $50 trillion of global GDP, about half of global GDP at the moment. But it's also estimated that these technologies are going to create up to $210 trillion of new opportunity. And this is really where a lot of clients basically want to spend a lot of their time, because they want to understand what these new opportunities are while minimizing the downsides. Now, from a technology perspective, and again, these technologies are in the codexes that I alluded to earlier. I'm not going to go through this in any particular detail. This is my 311 emerging technology starburst. So in it, basically, we have a look at over 180 emerging and exponential technologies, where AI is just one, up to a time span of 50 years. Now, any one of these technologies can either transform an individual industry, like 3D printing, for example, will help transform the manufacturing industry. But other technologies, other general purpose technologies like artificial intelligence or 5G, will help transform every industry. So when we have a look at the different technologies that organizations have access to combine together to create new products and services that are either incremental or disruptive to them, their industry, or their competitors, there are a huge number of things basically that we can actually talk about and explore. And when we have a look at the future of just computing, for example, we have quantum computers coming through, which are billions of times faster than current traditional computers. And we have low Earth orbit satellite systems coming through, which connect the other 4 billion people on the planet, and so on and so forth. But you can kind of see, when you look at this starburst, the technological complexity that organizations are trying to get their heads around when we consider the future. Now, from a leadership perspective, this is, on the one hand, challenging, because we're already seeing the pace and the rate of change accelerate. We've already seen the point in time arrive where we can disrupt the global banking system in a day with cryptocurrencies such as Facebook's, in 2019, Libra cryptocurrency, which, had Zuckerberg been able to push it live, could have been used by 2 billion people by the end of the day, and which, according to the world leaders, basically would have disrupted the global financial services system almost overnight. So when we talk about dealing with the future, speed matters. Additionally, every company, irrespective of the sector that they operate in, is now a technology company, which is good news for you guys. 5 is the new 10. Now, what I mean by this is, if the rate of global change is accelerating, and if it's continuing to accelerate, then in human terms, we think that 10 years looks quite linear. But if everything's accelerating, then a company's 10-year plan, in reality, is actually a 5-year plan. A 5-year plan is a 3-year plan. We're already seeing this. I mean, for example, how many business plans have already been thrown out at the advent of ChatGPT, let alone the metaverse that we had last year, and so on and so forth. So the strategy horizons that your customers basically are actually looking to actually needs to change and keep up with the times. 45% of what happens to an organization now is directly influenced by the CEO. This means that 55% of what happens to a company happens from external factors, like those trends that I showed you. This is worrying for all CEOs. But from a leadership perspective, leaders today need to be curious, because they need to be able to explore other things, other industries, other technologies, other opportunities, other threats. But on the other hand, they also need to be open-minded, and I'll show you why. The main reason they need to be open-minded is because the future doesn't operate by the same rules as the past. Increasingly, we can do very strange things with technology that make even science fiction look relatively tame. So if clients aren't open-minded, then they're going to just ignore or critique things that are actually world-changing. Then they need to be adaptable, collaborative, not just with people, but also with machines, and they need to be able to take risks and experiment. That's crucial. But in addition to this, in the face of change, organizations need to balance two things. On the one hand, they need to be resilient because they need to be able to weather, for example, supply chain shocks. But they also need to be flexible because they need to be able to adjust, for example, their IT systems, their operations, their front of house, according to changing environments, whether it's changing customer behaviors, whether it's changing trends, and so on and so forth. And this is a particular challenge. So this is where we look at operational models, basically like composable IT or adaptable operating models. Now, this is sort of one question I typically ask most of the boards that I talk to, because this is actually a good way to understand how future fit your customers actually are. So if you ask your customers, how many new products have you introduced in the past 18 months? How much of the company have you reinvented in the past 18 months? And can your customers prove that they can move at speed? Not do they think they can move at speed, but can they prove that they can move at speed? So for example, this is where we talk about DevOps and the ability to create new products in weeks, not years, that kind of stuff. Move into new markets quickly, move out of markets quickly. If your clients basically say, we haven't introduced any products, we haven't reinvented the organization, and we can't move at speed, then they are prime candidates to get crushed by the future, as well as their competitors who are in a better position to capitalize on the opportunities that we're actually seeing coming. Now, from a universal trends perspective, this is where we get kind of into, the content's a bit heavy because there's a lot that you guys care about and there's a lot that customers care about, but these are my kind of top picks for the different lines of business that we're going to be talking about. So business models. Now, as you guys very well know, once an industry or organization becomes digital native, the boundaries between different industries start eroding and becoming increasingly eliminated. Now, on the one hand, this means that if you're a fully digital business, and you're in the financial services sector, you can move into the telco sector, the insurance sector, the health sector, quicker than you could before. So globally, this actually leads to this kind of arms race where, for example, if you look at Jio based in India, as well as Neo, which many people think of as an electric car company in China, we have the era of the super app. Now, Asia and Latin America are the two leading continents for super app business models, which is a conversation in itself. Now, if you look at Neo, for example, many people think that Neo is an electric car company. And I have many examples, but we're pressed on time. Neo is a company that sells cars, lifestyle services, food. They sell home insurance. They sell all manner of different things. So an electric car company is increasingly a super app platform. And we see the same with banks in Latin America. We see the same basically with other organizations elsewhere. And that's before we talk about platforms like WhatsApp and WeChat and so on and so forth. So every organization, once they are digital natives, have the opportunity to move into new markets quicker and cheaper than ever before, and actually capitalize on the super app business model. Now, from a human perspective, we all understand the gig economy. That's on the rise. 36% of millennials work in the gig economy. But as we start seeing increasingly intelligent and automated or autonomous artificial intelligences and machines have you actually considered this next gig economy? The machine gig economy. Because increasingly, I can just go to a website, for example, if we look at Midjourney, type in text, the AI understands what I'm trying to do, and it creates an image, or it creates a contract if it's a lawyer bot, etc., etc. So we talk about the human gig economy, but we are starting to see the rise of what I call the machine gig economy, where increasingly the freelancers are being replaced by AIs. Coding, for example, I can simply go to a number of different sites, type in the programs and applications that I want these AIs to create, as I'll show you in a bit, and they will create the applications, which is an opportunity for you as well as a bit of a threat. We've got algorithmic organizations. Increasingly, artificial intelligence is being used to hire people and identify them, manage people, fire people in the case of Uber and Amazon, and then do it all over again. So in the case of Amazon and Uber, they got taken to the European Court of Justice because their AIs were monitoring the performance of employees, and if the employees didn't meet particular KPIs or criteria, then they automatically were fired by the artificial intelligence. So just consider this. We're seeing the rise of what I call algorithmic organizations, where increasingly AIs are taking on more, shall we say, day-to-day business operations and managerial responsibilities. When we have a look at companies like Jack Dorsey's new Blue Sky social platform, which is a kind of replacement to Twitter, we're also seeing the rise of company as a protocol. Now, from a trends perspective, and these trends again basically are in the codexes I mentioned earlier, this is giving rise to what we call headless organizations. Now, in Blue Sky's case, this is decentralized governance and operations. But when we talk about headless brands, we can also think about Bitcoin. Yeah, Bitcoin is a brand, but it has no leadership. It has no leadership hierarchy, etc., etc. So when we talk about operating models, increasingly we have the rise of headless organizations. Now, as a business, how do you talk to these headless organizations? How do you sell them anything? Because there are more of these coming. And then we also have this in Hong Kong and in Wall Street, especially in the financial services sector, the social media sector, and the communications sector, we are seeing the rise of fully autonomous companies. Amazon and JD.com have everything they need to become fully autonomous organizations. And that's before we discuss the rise of fully autonomous dark warehouses, dark restaurants, etc., etc., etc. So we already have the technologies that we need to combine together to create organizations that are run, operated, and scaled by artificial intelligences. And we've already done it. So that's just the business model piece. Now, when we talk about customer experience, I know that you guys basically are experts in the customer experience. So I'm going to sort of teach you to suck eggs a little bit. I apologize for that. But yeah, we know basically that increasingly the customer experience is bold. That's it. Now, what I mean by that is we are expecting our customers to embrace our products and services and our brands in new ways. And I'll show you some of those. Personal. So increasingly these experiences leverage artificial intelligence and big data as well as quantum computing. In MasterCard's case, we're using quantum computers to do real-time loyalty programs now, etc., etc. So hyper-personal experiences, as well as omni-channel and opti-channel experiences that are seamless and frictionless. And then they're increasingly sci-fi-like. Because if you consider the point of view of a customer, some of the things that technology lets us do is increasingly science fiction-like. And I'll give you some examples. But we also have 3 economies coming through. And from a brand perspective, I can now sell you the same thing 3 times. So brands love this slide because I can sell you a physical product, like a trainer, a digital product, like a running app and a subscription to a running app. And then I can sell you a virtual product like a virtual trainer. So companies now have the opportunity to sell the same thing 3 times. Triple the revenues, triple the stickiness, triple the loyalty. Depends on how you put it together. Now, an example of this is Adidas. Adidas are selling virtual merch. You buy the virtual trainer and you can pick the real trainer up in store, along with that running app that I mentioned. When we have a look at Mercedes, we have Mercedes that are using brands like Soul Machines to create digital human avatars that can talk to you using natural language, that you can talk to on a Mercedes TV streaming platform, and you can simply talk to it and say, I'm looking for a new car, and the digital human takes you through the customer journey. And then says, if you want to buy the car, just tell me yes, and you use your voice to authenticate basically the purchase. When we have a look at Coca-Cola, in Coca-Cola, you can go into Roblox and you can buy virtual Coca-Cola, which gives your characters a boost. And then you can actually swap that virtual Coca-Cola using a QR code for a real version of that Coca-Cola drink in the real world. So this is where we talk about 5 digital products. But think about this from a customer experience perspective. Just these 3 slides are completely different to any kind of customer experience that we would normally expect to have with a brand. When we have a look at Audi, and you can go and test drive your Audi in virtual reality. You never need to leave your sofa. Or in Audi's case, you never actually need to leave the showroom, which is quite an ironic example of poor execution and poor thinking, because you go to the showroom and then you actually go and drive around in an Audi in virtual reality while you're in the showroom. You might as well just go and see the real car. When we have a look at the future of payments and money and value, Web3 technologies increasingly let us buy products not with money, not with cash, not with the US dollar, the euro, the renminbi, etc., etc. Increasingly, I can buy products. In this case, I can buy Nike's virtual merchandise with moves. So using IoT, my trainers are tracked. Once I get up to a certain number of moves, I can buy some virtual merchandise basically from the Nike virtual store. So when we talk about the future of money and Web3, are we talking about the future of money or the future of value transfer? Because that's very different. IKEA are letting people pay for goods with time. When we have a look at Bravura, you can read articles, you can engage, you can click different things and get rewarded in crypto. So when we have a look at the future of financial services, that's a very different space. When we flip back to Adidas, you can go into a store in Germany, design your sneaker or your trainer, which is a customized, personalized product that Adidas makes 65% margin on, and which they don't have to have any inventory for, which is great from their perspective, and which collapses their supply chain. And you can go and print your sneakers in the back of the store. On-demand manufacturing, on-demand customization, on-demand personalization. Adidas loves it, the customer pays more. And then we have quantum rewards, as I sort of mentioned with MasterCard, where we can take all of the customer data that we see, mash it together, crunch it together, analyze it, and provide real-time personalized experiences, but also personalized rewards based on the customer's unique environment, situation, biometrics, biomarker information, and much more. Now, from a cyber perspective, there's a lot of weirdness here as well. Now, the organized crime industry is now turning over at least $6 trillion. We see this in a variety of different ways. That's a conversation in itself. When we have a look at revenues from cyber-related activities and crime, in the past, since 2018, so in the past sort of 5 years, we've seen serious organized crime revenues from cyber operations increase by $400 billion. It's now estimated that this is actually sitting at around the $1.2 trillion revenue mark for serious organized crime, and we're seeing growth of about 19% per year. Now, the cost of attacking your clients or even yourselves is dropping to zero, because as somebody with no expertise, I can go onto the dark web, download some exploits, watch an anonymous YouTube video on how to deploy them. And if I don't know how to deploy these exploits and these attacks, then I've got a dark web self-service desk that can help me. And if someone helps me deploy these exploits against a particular company, they take 30% of whatever I earn from that attack. So the cost of attacking companies is dropping to zero. And that's before we talk about the weaponization of artificial intelligence and robo-hackers. Now, when we look at ransomware, ransomware is everywhere. I can put ransomware on people's implanted medical devices. I can hold your city or your country to ransom, let alone basically your business. So from an insurance perspective, this is the trend that I'm seeing globally. Most insurers are now at the point where they are saying protecting businesses against ransomware is difficult and it's largely uninsurable. So imagine being a client and being told that if you get attacked by particular exploits and everything else, you're not insured. In Maersk's case, they had their entire organization taken out with ransomware. That's a massive capital hit basically for any business. In 2025, roughly when we reach 1,000 qubits basically on a quantum computer, we will be able to hack 70% of all today's encryption standards, generally within minutes. We'll be able to hack 4,096-bit encryption in between 8 to 12 hours using quantum computers, and it's estimated by national security agencies that the first thing that goes when cyber criminals get access to a quantum computer, which some of them are actually already making in their garages, these are called nuclear magnetic resonance quantum computers. They only have a few qubits, but we have quantum computers being made in garages, let alone basically by big companies like, the IBMs and the Googles and the D-Waves of the world. We think that the crypto wallets go first, because that's generally 256 AES bit encryption. When we have a look at the use of generative artificial intelligence in phishing, we have already seen the development of what we call generative polymorphic malware. Now, this is malware that is able to rewrite and adapt and evolve its own code so that you can't detect it using traditional antivirus tools or cybersecurity tools. So these are already here. You can think state-sponsored hacking, but basically at AI speed. We've got biometric spoofing. I can clone your voice. I can clone your face. We've already had a CEO that's had over $500,000 actually stolen from his business because people cloned his voice and his face and then did a FaceTime call with the CFO of the business asking him to transfer the money basically into a Romanian bank account. So biometric spoofing is up on the rise. And deepfake hires, we're seeing more organizations being attacked by deepfakes. Now, what I mean by this is we're all used to hiring that human gig economy worker, except increasingly quite a lot of those people that we are interviewing via video are actually using deep-faked images of themselves. And this is deep-fake video, not static imagery. So this is where increasingly companies are actually hiring the criminals and then giving them access to their internal IT and network systems. However, using AI and machine learning, we're also able to predict cyber attacks. In this case, basically, we had Forta, a cybersecurity company, that was able to predict that Euler Hermes was going to see $200 million worth of crypto taken from their protocol. In this particular case, they notified Euler Hermes and said, we know that you are going to have $200 million stolen from you, and it's going to happen really soon. But while Euler actually had the information, they couldn't react fast enough. And the $200 million in crypto went. They got it back, but it went. So increasingly, there is the trend of being able to predict cyber attacks by looking at dark web information, chatter in forums, the exploits that are being downloaded, the companies that people are talking about in these forums, and so on and so forth. In addition to that, we also have new ways to identify malware, which I think are sort of quite interesting. So I've seen quite a number of cybersecurity companies now using machine vision, not just AI, but machine vision, to visualize the code in emails, websites, and everything else. And when you actually use machine vision to visualize malware, it looks very different to an official website. So this is a really interesting area of research, and it's one basically that's allowing us to pick up 99.9% of malware, phishing sites, and all that kind of stuff. So worth mentioning. Research and development, also changing. We're seeing artificial intelligence increasingly creating hardware and software products. So we already have AIs that are designing new artificial intelligences better than the human experts can at Google. We've got Toyota that are using AIs to design new lithium-ion EV batteries, but rather than taking 2 years, it's taking 2 weeks to design next-generation electric vehicle batteries. Google is using AI to design new artificial intelligence computer chips. General Motors is using AI to design new cars. We all know about AI creating content. That is a whole topic in itself. We've got InSilico in Australia using AI to design 30,000 new drugs, healthcare drugs, in 21 days. OpenAI using AI to design new robots in days with hundreds of years worth of training data. And then software as well. But we've got AIs designing new rocket engines. This rocket engine is from Hyperganic. It's a single-piece rocket engine, which is unique in itself, that can be 3D printed, which collapses the supply chain. We've got Under Armour that's using AI to design new sneakers. This is called the Architect sneaker. It's $300, and you can 3D print it. But this sneaker was designed in under a day. It can be printed the next day, and you've just cut the amount of time that it takes to design hardware products, physical products, by 99%. So if you recall earlier, I talked about the speed of change. We can write software and digital stuff faster. But increasingly, we can also redesign physical products faster, innovate physical products multiple times faster than we ever could in the past. And then we have Amazon that is actually using AI to design new fashion lines. And it goes out in this case, looks at what everybody likes because they put 5-star reviews on a shirt, for example, and then it just designs a new shirt based on the inputs that it's got. And then we have an on-demand manufacturing system that makes this shirt once you've ordered it, and it can get delivered by drones. Now, all of these sort of lines of business are connected as well, but I've sort of broken them down into silos just to make it a little bit easier to digest. Now, when we look at supply chains, how and why we move atoms is changing. So, for example, if you consider energy, 30% of what we move around the planet is oil and gas. We're transitioning to renewables, which means that we are moving less oil and gas around. When we have a look at food, increasingly we have new ways to produce food, which means that the global merchandise trends are actually changing as well. And when we have a look at goods, we have companies like Adidas, for example, that are able to 3D print products in the back of their stores, which now means that Adidas don't need to make 100 million pairs of trainers in Shanghai and ship them to Germany. So new manufacturing technologies let us completely eliminate global supply chains in certain situations. We've also got the digitization of products. So for example, if you think about your phone, your smartphone is increasingly becoming a tricorder. I no longer necessarily need to move as much medical equipment around the world because we are digitizing different products and services. So for example, you can use the artificial intelligence embedded on your phone with the camera to identify whether or not you have a genetic condition, pancreatic cancer, to identify your heart rate, your blood pressure, whether you have skin cancer. You can use the microphone in your smartphone to tell whether or not you actually have depression, PTSD, a mental health disorder. So as we digitize more and more services and products, we no longer necessarily need to move the same things around the planet that we did. And then when we have a look at companies like BMW, every BMW car generally is made up of about 30,000 different components. They have a massive global supply chain. Think about Airbus as well. But BMW is now using quantum computers to help them optimize their global supply chains. So this is where I kind of call these quantum supply chains. Supply chains themselves are becoming increasingly autonomous because we are creating digital twins of them, metaverse twins of them. If you have companies like Aviva, so Aviva actually are an industrial control supply chain company, and increasingly they have metaverse digital twins, which are quite spectacular. But once we start adding artificial intelligence into these supply chains, we can do a number of different things. We can automate parts of a supply chain, automated procurement. But we can also start seeing these AIs making autonomous decisions. So when we have a look at things like SAP Ariba, when we have a look at Oracle, for example, from an ERP perspective, increasingly, if the system knows that I want to order a server, for example, a piece of server hardware, it can automatically scan everything and say, well, based on your KPIs, I need to order a new server which meets these specifications, etc., from suppliers basically that have the best ESG ratings. And then they can start doing risk analysis, risk scores, sustainability weightings, and so on and so forth. So we're increasingly moving towards fully autonomous supply chains that know that you've run out of stock of something and then can just automatically reorder it based on whatever scope or criteria that you have. So again, conversations in conversations, but at a very high level, we're moving to autonomous supply chains. Supply chains are also increasingly being flattened because one of the biggest problems that we had during COVID was supply chain resilience. Only 15% of supply chains globally are actually resilient, where we have dual sourcing of products and so on and so forth. So by flattening supply chains, this is where rather than creating a car from 30,000 components or a rocket engine from 10,000 components, we redesign those products so they have fewer components. And so we need to order and move fewer components around. So flattening supply chains is happening at a global level. Increasingly, supply chains are intelligent and they're self-optimizing, which feeds into the autonomous piece. Now, when we talk about redesigning products, we have companies like Google and Facebook that are redesigning the size of hard drives because most hard drives are 3.5 inches wide. But in a hyperscale data center, we don't want lots of little hard drives, we want 7-inch hard drives. So we are flattening supply chains by redesigning products. When we have a look at the professional services supply chains, one of my clients basically is buy-in. They buy $32 billion worth of products, including from you guys, which are professional services, consultancy, as well as hardware and software. We've already got AIs in the US that can automatically configure networks. So if you have network engineers, increasingly AI can do that job. This is a digital example of flattening and or eliminating supply chains in the professional services, technology, and consulting businesses. And then we also have platforms from companies like IBM as well as Facebook. So in Facebook's case, they have an artificial intelligence called a transcoder. Now, Facebook's transcoder platform lets you take old code, whether it's, COBOL or whatever it happens to be, and just like human translation, translate old code bases into new code like Python, Ruby, Java, and so on and so forth. Now, years ago, basically, I was speaking to Lloyds Bank. They had $1 billion worth of hardware on the floor, and the biggest problem they had moving their old applications off AS400 mainframes was the cost of rewriting the software and the software development. Increasingly, these kinds of tools, along with generative artificial intelligence, help us reduce the cost of rewriting software, transcribing software, and then moving and modernizing legacy platforms onto more agile web-based environments and platforms. So this is an example of flattening and eliminating a global supply chain, which is both disruptive to you at Accenture, but also an opportunity. Especially when we have a look at the Indian outsourcers, because my background is actually working in technology. The Indian outsourcers like TCS, Tata, and HCL, and so on and so forth, always manage to undercut everybody else by about 30% in costs. So now imagine actually using these technologies to actually undercut your competition. Now, from a workplace perspective, this is a very carefully worded slide. We can work anywhere, but we can also work from anywhere. Now, what I mean by that is if you have a look at organizations like yourselves, basically with the nth floor, where you've onboarded over 150,000 new hires into the metaverse, companies like Ernst & Young have been replicating their offices, as well as companies like NVIDIA. NVIDIA have been recreating their offices in the metaverse. So even though basically I might be at home, I can work from anywhere. I could recreate a virtual factory of one of my customers, and I could end up actually working in virtual reality from that customer location. So this is why I say we can work from anywhere using virtual reality and different metaverse technologies. But also, I can work from anywhere. Now, when we talk about the decentralization of jobs, we know that as sales guys, basically you can take your laptop and you can work from home, you can work from the beach. But when we have a look at surgeons, when we have a look at construction workers, we can do that with them as well. We can have construction workers based in Germany using 5G, drones, and robotic technologies to build buildings in South Korea 3,500 miles away. But we can also have surgeons who might be based in Mumbai who are operating and doing neurosurgery on people in London using this kind of technology. Now, this technology potentially saves 17 million lives and helps 143 million people who don't have access to surgeons. So imagine being able to be a surgeon and work from anywhere using a mixture of immersive technologies, 5G, robotics, artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth.
We had a young woman with an acute heart attack. The total transfer time to get her to our hospital was 3 hours. There's a feeling of helplessness as a physician that you know what the treatment is to limit their chance of death, but you can't get to them.
Our hypothesis is that if we implement remote robotics in its full capacity, we will change the lives for hundreds of thousands of patients in the US and millions around the world.
Using technologies like 5G networks and robotic systems to provide cardiac care at a distance and be able to do telestenting has the potential to change the landscape of medicine. 5G technology really opens up the possibility to do these over longer distances with minimal delays in signal and transmitting greater amounts of data.
Being able to reach a patient hundreds of miles away to deliver the care they need when they need it is one of the most disruptive things happening in the medical industry.
And it affects all industries. So we can decentralize almost any kind of job now, which fundamentally affects the workplace and the workforce. Speaking of which, when we have a look at AI, AI is the tractor, it's the printing press, it's the loom. You can either be the out-of-work farmhand or you can be the CEO of John Deere. AI is fundamentally disruptive. Now, when we have a look at ChatGPT, here are some fun little numbers for you. So ChatGPT has 1% of the connections in the human brain. It has 1 trillion parameters. But it has a verbal IQ of 155, which puts it in the top 0.1% of humans. It contains over 1,000 times more general knowledge than any human brain on the planet. And because of its architecture, it learns 300 million times faster than the human brain. And these statistics come from studies, but also come from characters like Jeff Hinton, who is the godfather of artificial intelligence, who said this about the new large language models that we see. His main worry is that, unlike human learning, they are a fundamentally superior learning algorithm because they have 1,000 times more knowledge, learn 300 million times faster than the human brain, but in just 1% of the human brain connections. So consider this. This is what we're up against over the next 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 years. You need a strategy to adapt to this. However, I do a lot of work basically with universities around the world and a lot of very large companies. We can use these artificial intelligences to augment human learning. And I've already been able to show basically that we can actually take an average worker and upskill them to an expert. I've also managed to show that we can accelerate human learning 3 times. So we talk about artificial superintelligence, but what if you actually use these incredibly clever machines to actually create human superintelligence? We know how. We know how to take you from a newbie to an average to an expert faster than ever before in a particular topic. We know how to accelerate your learning 3-fold because this is something called Bloom's 2 sigma problem, which says if we actually have one-on-one tutors, we can learn more, we can learn faster. AI is a fantastic tutor if you know how to use it. And again, if you go to the Codex page, I've literally just published an update to my Future of Education and Learning Codex. And you can see all the prompts that you can use and all the things you can do in that book. But it also democratizes access to skills. If I automate a job using AI and I put a good interface on the front of that AI, I now give you access to that skill. And it also 100x's productivity. Now, here's a little example you guys might be able to appreciate. I'm not a programmer. However, because I know how to use English language, I went onto Google Bard, and you can see this here, and I said, in Python, create a Stripe payment integration in Laravel. So even though I'm not a coder or a programmer, because we've automated different parts of the programming stack, I now have access to that skill. So AI democratizes access to skills. So what would you do as an individual if the only thing you have access to is all the world's knowledge, all the world's skills? Okay, so you can try these out for yourselves. Now, in addition to this, from an Accenture perspective, because coding is becoming easier to do, because coders, according to MIT and surveys, are now 60% more productive thanks to generative artificial intelligence, this means that your customers are increasingly going to be drowning in cheap AI-generated apps. So it's easier to create content. It's easier to create software. So this is a massive opportunity, I think, basically for you guys at Accenture. We have AIs that are helping humans basically create better strategies, business strategies and gaming strategies. So this is what happens when we augment humans with AI, not replace humans. We have AIs in the customer service teams that are helping teach humans empathy because they're listening to people talk, they're listening to customers talk, and they're saying, pause here, or the customer sounds angry, try this approach. We've got boards that are increasingly relying on artificial intelligence to help them with decision making, which is both good and bad depending on the data and the AIs that they're actually using. So there are cons to this as well. But then we also have AIs that are increasingly making our decisions for us. So this is where, for example, we have robo-customers. Robo-customers are artificial intelligences that automatically order your products for you based on your preferences. So when we have a look at the future of decision making, by 2025, there will be more decisions made by machines, AIs, than humans. So just pause a moment on that. What does that do for trust in the machines, for decision making, for human behaviors and human opinions? It's dangerous. It's good, but it's also very dangerous if we aren't careful, if these aren't regulated, if we don't have the ethical and moral controls in place, if the data is bad, etc., etc. And then we're almost at the end. This is the end of the status quo because every industry is being disrupted. Every client basically that you face off to, their industry is being transformed in lots and lots of different ways. In the agricultural industry, we can take the cell from an animal, put it into something called a bioreactor. So take the cell from a chicken, put it into a bioreactor, and in Singapore, create chicken nuggets so we can create meat without the animal. We can also have vertical farms, basically, which means that we can grow crops anywhere on the planet with amazingly high yields, using no pesticides, using water extracted from the air, which help us feed every single person on the planet. The technologies we see in the agricultural space fundamentally help us end human starvation and malnourishment. In Dubai, we're using 3D printing to 3D print 11-story skyscrapers. So construction is changing from the inside out, let alone just the digitization of these individual industries. When we have a look at energy, the energy industry is at the start of a $92 trillion shift from fossil fuels to renewables, to hydrogen, to ammonia, to solar fuels, to batteries and grid-scale storage and everything else, to peer-to-peer blockchain energy trading networks, autonomous grids, and so on and so forth. When we have a look at finance, we've got banks being disrupted by fintechs, being disrupted by decentralized finance. If you think just of Roblox, Roblox has 300 million people. They could tap into the decentralized finance trend to take on companies like HSBC, or to take on Funding Circle, or to take on Visa or MasterCard or Discover. We have new ACH networks and new payment networks basically being lined up through the BRICS. There's a huge amount going on here. When we have a look at Web3, we can use Web3 to monetize almost anything. So this is what we call digital asset tokens. I can tokenize an artificial intelligence algorithm and sell you fractional shares in that AI in a way that I never could have in the past. When we have a look at healthcare, we have in vivo genetic engineering treatments, 3D printed human organs, regenerative medicine, personalized medicine. We can sequence the human genome now in 5 hours, which means that we can create a personally tailored cancer vaccine for you, which kills the grade 4 tumor that you might have. And we've done that, and in 100% of cases for particular cancers, we have killed even the most aggressive cancers. So when we have a look at healthcare, we're starting to get closer to an era where the human lifespan can extend beyond 100. All these are big conversations in themselves, by the way. In the industrial and manufacturing sector, we have digital twins, Industry 4.0. When we have a look at the entertainment sector, basically we have AIs that are increasingly creating all kinds of different content, publishing it, distributing it, and even procedural content like procedural podcasts that are infinite and never end. In the gaming industry, we have AIs that are creating infinite gaming worlds. In retail, we have the rise of virtual reality malls in Hong Kong, virtual reality landlords, and so on and so forth. In the communications space, 5G, 6G, but also low Earth orbit satellite systems from companies like OneWeb and Starlink, which increasingly connect every person on the planet irrespective of where they are. If you're a digital business selling something as a subscription, what's happening in the telco sector doubles your global addressable market opportunity. How do you actually cope with that? How do you exploit it? And then transportation. The only thing that's happening with transportation, whether it's aircraft, cargo ships, cars, vans, drones, is everything is going fully autonomous and everything is using alternative fuels. So we're moving away from fossil fuels to lithium-ion batteries, cars that charge themselves wirelessly, ammonia ships, hydrogen-powered aircraft, and so on and so forth. So hopefully, as you've seen from this presentation, and I did say we were going to pack a lot in, and I've recorded it so I can send it through to you. The only thing that's changing is everything. But from your client's perspective, as well as your own perspectives, trying to see all these things, understand what they mean for you at an individual level, a professional level, or an industrial level, is becoming increasingly difficult. And so hopefully I've managed to simplify some of the things for you, even though I admit I've gone through it very quickly. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that. And I think we've got some time for some questions and answers.